pastor is to always take advantage of good moments, good teaching moments, and good fundraising moments. So I think right now might be a great fundraising moment. Does anyone want to donate money to see if Mark will eat the contents of that little jar?
Oh, come on!
We love you, Mark. You're so much fun. You know, we have our Tuesday Bible studies. I would recommend them to anyone who can participate. They're a really great way to get into the Word, and it's been a joy for me as I prepare because I participate in those. And I knew that I was preaching this week, so I have to tell you, when Pastor Betsy sent me the teaching text for this week, my very first reaction was, so what's the gospel reading? That Corinthians text is deep and nuanced, and we could spend all day here. But don't worry, my professors taught me that there is a fine line between a long sermon and a hostage situation. So we won't go there. But I could really easily, probably my sweet spot is teaching, and so I have to be really careful not to slip into, this passage is an easy one to slip into teaching instead of preaching, and we could be here all day. Especially since this passage addresses some of the really potentially divisive doctrines between different denominations, and so it's really interesting to talk about. And yet, it's ultimately simple too, because the Christian faith is really well encompassed in this Corinthians passage. Paul was doing a good one when he wrote to the Corinthians about this. And in particular, do you see the part where Paul says that Christ died for all? Can we just pause on that statement for a moment? Can we just, in an age where the nuns and the duns are multiplying and people are walking away from the Christian faith because the church isn't well representing the faith, can we just pause on that one statement from Paul? Christ died for all. There isn't a caveat in there. It's not some. It's not the elect. It's not, well, except for this group of people. Christ died for all. Verse 14. For the love of Christ urges us on, because we are convinced that one has died for all, and therefore all have died. And he died for all. All. And it is the love of Christ which urges us on. Catch that too. It's not the judgment of Christ that urges us on. It's not the specific doctrines of Christ which urges us on. It's the love of Christ which urges. Are you not compelled by the love of Christ to do more? I'm reading a book by Brad Jerzak this week, and there was a moment when I just openly wept. Just sitting there in my room by myself, working through this book, and I get to a chapter where he describes the parable of the rich man and Lazarus, and I just wept out of joy and hope because of the way that he described the character of God and the gospel of salvation in that book. It's the love of Christ that urges us on. And this is one of many passages in Scripture which emphasizes the ultimate efficacy of Jesus' life, death, and resurrection for all of humanity. Okay, efficacy is a big pastor word, right? And some of you are going, what? You know, it's a word we use to sound smart when we want to say effective. So, Christ's death is effective for everyone. This is one of those passages. You'll hear universalists, they'll lean into this passage because it says that Christ died for all. And so it means that Christ's death, life, death, and resurrection is sufficient for all people. And I don't know about you, but I think that should change how we live our lives. If Christ died for everyone, then that should change how we live our lives. That should change how we see ourselves. And that should change how we see each other. Verse 10, we were talking before service, right? I don't know if you noticed this, but the Corinthians reading was 6 through 9 and then 14. And I'm scratching my head going, yeah, but I need to preach on verse 10. And that's right in the middle. And why did they drop that out? Verse 10 says, "From now on, therefore, we regard no one from a human point of view." All right, I'm at verse 16. That is in there. The text is too small. "From now on, therefore," I'm going to get to 10 in just a minute. Consider that a teaser. From now on, therefore, we regard no one from a human point of view. This is what I mean when we should see each other differently, and we should see ourselves differently, right? When you look at each other with our human eyes, we can see the differences in our stature, in our build, in our color, in our hairstyle. We can, there was a time when our ancestors could discern, what tribe or nation that people came from. We can see each other, we can judge. I pick out my shoes for Sunday service because sometimes people look at shoes, right? We have so many different ways that we judge each other with our human eyes. But when we pause to think that Christ died for all, and when we pause to think that, here's a beautiful exercise. We don't have, I know that we got this beautiful painting of Jesus up here, and Bible study, we talked about this one for a long time, because it's the moment of the ascension, and we debated how many people knew that. We don't have, there's paintings of Jesus around here, but they're all representations, right? We don't really have an image of what Jesus looked like. But I can help you. Look to your left. Look to your right. Look in front of you and behind you. That's Christ. The people sitting around you are Christ. We're called, the church is called to be Jesus with skin on. And we are all created in God's image. And so to hear that love of Christ, to hear that everybody is loved by God and that Christ's death is for everyone, we should regard each other not from our human point of view, but from a God point of view. The blood of Christ not only washes clean our appearance in God's eyes, but it should also wash clean the appearance of each other in our eyes. And here's verse 10. Now I get to talk about verse 10. It's dropped out of the lectionary reading for some reason. Verse 10 says, "For all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ." I think we like that word, don't we? You see judgment, and we jump right on that word. That's a weapon we like to wield. We're all about that. We can do that, can't we? But it says, "For all must appear before the judgment seat of Christ." Not Jason. Not Alicia. Not Megan. The judgment seat of Christ. And you know what? That is good news. Because when you look at Scripture, just take this week. Here's your assignment for this week. Go look at the New Testament. Go look at the gospel accounts. And find all of the places where Jesus judges somebody. With the exception of the religious leaders, Jesus doesn't condemn anyone. You see, think about the story of the woman caught in adultery. Right? There's so many problems with that story. According to Jewish law, the man should have been brought forward too, but wasn't. And so they're trying to trap Jesus. This isn't about enforcing the law. This is them trying to trap Jesus. And so they bring her before him, and he starts to draw in the sand. And then what does he say? "Let the first one who is without sin throw the first stone." There was one person in that crowd who had any right to throw a stone. And that was Jesus. And what did he say? He looked up, and everyone was gone except for the woman. And he asked her, "Where are those that condemn you?" And she said, "They're all gone. There is no one here who condemns me." And he said, neither do I condemn you. The one person in that crowd who had every right to pick up a stone and enforce the law didn't. And doesn't. That's the good news. Judgment is reserved not even in the Father. The Father gives judgment to Jesus. And we have Bible accounts that show us what Jesus' judgment looks like. And it's love. And it's patience. Unless you're using religion for your own purposes, unless you're withholding grace and mercy, unless the hungry are not being fed, the naked are not being clothed, and the homeless are not being sheltered, and the strangers are not being welcomed, don't turn off. Then Jesus has some harsh words. Go look to Matthew 25 if you want to see those. But have a mirror ready when you do. But the good news is that the one who can cast a stone says, neither do I condemn you. And what peace and comfort that gives as we are liberated to see ourselves and others through those eyes where all things are made new. Not your anxiety, not your fear, not your failures, not how much money you make, not how much influence you have in the world, not how small your little piece of the world is, but through the eyes of God who says, neither do I condemn you. You're my child. And if we could have enough faith in that gospel, then I think the world would know peace. I think that if we could see everyone as liberated through Christ, the church could truly be the force in the world that makes all things new. Let us go and namaste.